Welcome back to the Blazor Server in-depth course. In this lesson, we're going to be looking at the default layout and how it really works. We've already kind of seen the navigation of it, but now we're going to dig into the pieces of it to see how it's laid out, how we can even modify it if we'd like to better fit our environment. All right, so let's go to Visual Studio. We'll create our new project, and we'll select a Blazor app, call it Blazor app, and the solution name is default layout demo. Hit create. Make sure you have ASP.NET Core 3.1, Blazor Server app, HTTPS, all the same stuff we've been doing all along. And you may wonder why I keep saying that whole process of creating a template. And the reason why is because creating these templates over and over gets to the point where you just know what to do. It's kind of ingrained. And that's really good. That's something you really want to have happen. So don't miss that opportunity by creating just one project and reusing it over and over. Create it over and over and over again, because doing that builds some repetition that really solidifies in your mind how to do things. All right, so let's look at the default layout for our page. If you remember, the starting point is really the underscore host.cs HTML. This is the overall layout of our page, and it's where everything gets set up. So we have our doc type of HTML, and then our head section, and then our body, and then in the body we have our actual app. And that's where the component type of app is put in here, and it's rendered in server pre-rendered mode, which makes it a little faster on the client to actually display. So this is not specific to ASP.NET. This is just standard HTML and CSS. So we have things like bringing in our style sheets. We saw it before with Bootstrap, and then our own site, and that site.css overwrites or overrides anything in bootstrap.min.css where the two names are the same. All right. And the base href is the root of our website. All right, so this is pretty standard stuff except for that one tag there, and that just says, hey, the root of our website is where our application is located. In the body section, we've seen the error div. We saw how to change that, and it's for staging and production versus on the left, and then we have this main section over here. Now, even in the main section, notice main is here, but then we have a class that says top row, and it says about, and that's where we get this gray bar. And then below that, we have a class called content, which is where we have the at body, which renders the actual Blazor page or that Razor snippet. So that's where this comes in. So this section in here, this fully white section, is where our Razor components or Razor pages get rendered. Outside of this is setup stuff we have in our layout, whether it's the navigation on the left or it is that navigation bar at the very top. So the first question you might ask is, how does it know to render this section this width? How does it know that main takes up the rest of the screen? Well, there's two ways of finding this out. One way is to kind of dive into what sidebar and main do. But I found the easiest thing to do is when it's actually running, hit F12, get your developer tools out. Whoops, we still have, there we go. We still have the device toolbar on. Let's take that off. And now I can do the select an element, and I will select, this gets me close. I really want the sidebar. Notice I have the div class equals sidebar. And then with that, I can actually look over here on the right and see, well, where is sidebar really defined? And if you notice on the right, under styles, we can see what CSS has been applied to this element. In this case, we've got a media query with a minimum width of 768 pixels for sidebar, and that was applied from site.css line 158. And see the background image, and that's a linear gradient, and there is the coloring, and there's another color code as well. Then we have the top row, the background color. Then we have the brand, and I believe that's the open iconic font rendering and nav items and all the rest. So there's where all sidebar stuff is declared. And then it kind of stops right here. Then we have other things declared, but then 149 was it? Nope, not 149. It was 158. There we go. Media query with a minimum width of 768 pixels. We have sidebar that declares the width, the height, the position, and the top. All right, so this is all the information we need to know how to then modify this page if we want to. We can modify it right in our site.css file, which we own. It's not a Bootstrap thing. It's actually on top of Bootstrap. But that's how we know what the coloring is and how this actually works. If we collapse sidebar, we'll see we also have main. And again, if we move up a little bit, we can see that main has a declaration in site.css, and that's a flex of 1. And so that tells us that we've declared the main information in site.css as well. But inside there we have this, which is the top row, and that's being declared again in site.css. So even though we have Bootstrap, there's some additional CSS that's been designed in order to give us this exact layout. You don't have to use this. You can use something else, including Bootstrap's own navigation and you can do things a little differently if you would like. It's up to you. But just note that's where everything's declared is in site.css. That's how the coloring is done. That's how the layout is done for this default layout. So that's the CSS of it. So that's the kind of layout portion. But let's now talk about just the general layout of it. So the main layout, this is where our body goes, and that's below that top line, and it's to the right of our nav bar. So whenever you go to a Blazor page, so if we go to the index page, just note that this gets rendered in this section. All right, so if you want to make some modifications, this main layout.razor is the place you would do that, and that would apply to all of your pages. All right, now this nav menu right here, which may seem like an odd tag. If you're familiar with HTML, you'll know that's not a typical HTML tag, which is why it's also colored different. The nav menu actually is a Razor component. And we're going to cover Razor components more in the next section. But let's look at what that looks like. In the shared folder, there's nav menu, which corresponds to this name. That's because that's how you refer to it. That's how you get to it, is the nav menu. So this is a Razor component, and this is the navigation. Now this is actually a Razor page of sorts. It doesn't have the at page at the top. It's just a component. But this allows us to put a piece on the page. Because remember that Blazor is composable. You basically create little pieces and put them together and layer them and so on. So in this case, we create a piece that's just navigation. And now you can put that on a page. And so here we have at the top the branding, which says Blazor app. Let's just change that to say Timco demo, I guess. That works. And then we have our button for the navigation. And then in here we have our actual navigation links. This is where we have on the left there, we have the 3 different links we can go to for the 3 different sections. So let's look at these. We have an unordered list. That's what UL stands for. And then we have 3 different list items. So if you want to add a navigation link, which we will, then you want to add the entire list item section. And so it says, okay, what do you match on? And if you don't match on anything, then it uses the default. So this is an interesting one, which is the match right here. What it does is it identifies whether or not to highlight the link as active. So this navigation link, this nav link, what it's going to do is it's going to highlight, in this case, if the entire URL matches the path of our navigation. So that's the URL we're expecting, which is the root. Okay, href equals empty versus href equals counter. All right, so with this match and empty, it says nav link match is all, meaning the entire path has to match. Whereas if you don't specify match, so for example down here there's no specification for match, then by default, let's just show you this, match equals nav link match dot prefix. And what that means is it's going to match the first part of the path. So if the path matches if the URL matches the path, but may have something extra on the end of it, that's okay, we'll still match. Let me show you what I mean by that, because it's a little confusing probably. Okay, so here is an all match. Whoops, I can't do a / because I'm not in CSS or C#. But an all match is going to be localhost 51022, maybe something like that. That would match if our URL, like above, is supposed to be this. Okay? It would not match that. All right. So if we're all matching on this route, if our URL is this, that's a match. But once we go somewhere else, like /test, that's no longer a match. Therefore, it will not light up. Because then we have a prefix match. So if our path is going to be localhost 51022/counter, that's going to match this and that. Okay? So what it's looking for is this. And if your URL is this, cool, that matches. If your URL is this, that also matches because we've got the first part in. Now, it will not match this because we're looking for /counter included in that URL. So that's the difference between those two. Now let me comment these out. There we go. And let's just make that a little bit smaller. So by default, we're just going to use prefix. We don't have to specify it. It just does it by default. Okay, so this is a nav link. So a nav link has a class, and then we have this href, and it starts in the relative path of the root. So you don't have to specify just /. The / is implied. So you don't have to do this. You can just do, in this case, counter. Now, what would happen if you wanted to go to a test, like /test/counter? Well, you would say test/counter like that. That would work. All right. And again, that prefix match now would have to include the test in that path. All right. And then we have fetch data. And again, we have href matches fetch data. So it's the same kind of concept. We haven't specified match, but that's okay because it's defaulting to prefix. And notice that inside the nav link, we have this span, which this is where we get our icon from. So both of these, our icon and then our name or our words. So let's create our own. Let's start by going to let's go to the weather page, so fetch data. I don't like it calling it fetch data. So let's create a new page reference to say /weather. Weather/forecast. How about that? So now we have a subpage, just so you need to see the difference. So /weather/forecast. Well, let's create a new copy. So we're going to copy everything for one list item. And then down here, we're going to make some changes. First of all, it's going to be weather/forecast. That's the new path. And we're going to say weather forecast is the name. But we do need to change the icon. Now the icon uses what's called open iconic. If you go to useiconic.com/open, so useiconic.com/open, this is the free version of Iconic that comes with Blazor. And so these are all free, open to use icons that you can sort through. There's only a couple hundred, 223, but it's a very, very small file format, 12.4 kilobytes, which is a quarter of the size of Font Awesome, according to them. So now it also seems like they have a quarter of the icons. So again, you may want to bring in Font Awesome, that's fine, but just note that this is an option. Now, scrolling down through here, we do have Cloudy. That seems like it's probably a good icon for a weather service. So you could just click on this, and there's a whole bunch of different information you can read about how to bring it in. But if now you have the name of Cloudy, if you go to OI dash, there's probably there you go, Cloudy, last one, and that will bring that icon in for you. So let's just run this and see this page and see how we can get that weather forecast. Now remember, we have prefix match on both of these. So now we have our weather forecast, which is a separate link. So if I go to fetch data, this is the weather forecast page, but notice it only lights up the fetch data link because it's doing that prefix match. If I were to pass in additional data, test equals test, something like that, that still lights up the page. If I go home though, I have to have the right URL. Otherwise, notice how it's no longer lit up. And that's because I put in the URL the question mark test equals test. Because now no longer an exact match for our home page. Okay, let's go to weather forecast. Goes to the same place except the URL is different, /weather/forecast. So fetch data does not light up, but weather forecast does. So when you're creating your own pages, you can add to the navigation bar like I just did, make your modifications, and just know to use that match link if you need the exact match. Otherwise, which you probably don't, if you don't, just note that the prefix is what's going to be used, and that's how it knows what to light up. Now this is just HTML. You can put something different here. In this case, we're using span to bring in that icon, but you don't have to. You don't have to have an icon, or you could use something else like Font Awesome, like I said, or an image, or something else, or even multiple lines in here. But it's all wrapped inside navlink. Now at the very bottom down here, this is a little bit of setup code that allows us, notice the collapse nav menu. And so what it says is, hey, toggle the nav menu. And if you click that button, it's going to change the collapse nav menu boolean. And it's going to either collapse it or not, which that collapse is just a class. Notice nav menu CSS class, which changes based upon this boolean. Well, up at the very top here, nav menu CSS class is in that div. That's how we is for this lesson. I want you to practice this, try it out, try playing around with that navigation menu, move things around maybe. Maybe try some different CSS or different colorings and seeing what you like and how you might tweak this default layout, this main layout. to better fit your needs. All right. Once you've done that, come on back for the next lesson.